What if the dreams you have had your whole life were never just dreams? What if they were messages? Tonight, a young woman in Boston wakes up at 3:47 in the morning. Her hand has written 8 pages in a language that doesn't exist on Earth. This is the story of Maya Chen, an old man in a greenhouse, a child who has never had a body, and 19,000 souls dying in orbit around Neptune. Stay with me. This one will stay with you.
The first thing she noticed was the cold. Not the cold of an open window in November, which she knew, and not the cold of a poorly insulated apartment in the old part of Boston, which she also knew, but a different cold, deeper, the cold of something that had been waiting a very long time to be touched. It moved up the bones of her hand from the pen she was holding. It was 3:47 in the morning. The pen was the cheap black kind that the university handed out at orientation events, and the paper in front of her was a yellow legal pad that had been new at midnight and was now most of the way to being something else. Maya Chin did not remember picking up the pen. She did not remember sitting down. She had gone to bed at 11. She was reasonably certain of that, because she remembered the specific weight of pulling the comforter up to her chin and the specific small relief of her feet finally being warm, and she remembered the ceiling fan making its slow, uneven turns above her, and she remembered thinking, as she did most nights, that she would try again to sleep, and that she would probably fail, and that this was acceptable because it was what she had been doing for 28 years. And she was good at it now. What she did not remember was the kitchen table, or the chair, or the lamp she had apparently turned on, or the 8 pages of symbols she had apparently filled while the apartment slept around her. She looked at the symbols. They were not letters. They were not any alphabet she had ever seen, and she had seen most of them, because she had spent the last 7 years of her life in a doctoral program studying the way human languages organize themselves, and her brain had become a kind of patient museum where every script she had ever encountered was kept in a separate small room with the lights left on. None of those rooms contained these shapes. The shapes were curved and hooked and folded back on themselves, and they ran in vertical columns instead of horizontal lines, and there were periodic clusters of dots that her hand seemed to have placed with great care, and there was a rhythm to them that she could feel even though she could not read them, the way you can feel the rhythm of a song in a language you do not speak. She stared at the legal pad until her vision swam. Then she did what she always did when something frightened her. She got up. She filled the kettle. She watched the blue ring of flame appear underneath it. She listened to the small singing sound the metal made as it warmed. She got down the green ceramic mug that had been her grandmother's, and she put a tea bag in it, and she stood by the stove with her hands wrapped around her own elbows, and she waited for the water to boil. The kitchen window faced east. Outside, the sky was still the deep particular blue that comes only in the last hour before dawn, the blue that exists nowhere except in that hour. And somewhere in a tree, she could not see a single bird, had begun the small experimental sounds it makes before it commits to a real song. Boston was quiet. Boston was rarely quiet, and it had taken her years to recognize the small windows when it was, but she had become an expert in those windows because they were where she lived. She took the tea back to the table. She read what she had written. She read it slowly, moving her eyes down each column the way her hand had moved when it was making them, and she discovered that she could feel, very faintly, the meaning underneath the shapes, the way you can feel the shape of a coin through the fabric of a coat pocket. There was something about water, something about a long road. A name, she thought. A name she did not know. And then, near the bottom of the 7th page, a single shape that her chest understood before her mind did. A shape that meant, somehow, please. She put the pen down. She had been having the dreams for as long as she could remember. The dreams were not nightmares, and they were not exactly dreams either. They were more like visits to a place that her waking life had no map for. Sometimes the place was a room with no walls, only the suggestion of walls, and the suggestion was enough. Sometimes the place was a long staircase that did not go up or down but sideways, into a horizon that bent. Sometimes there was a child there. The child never spoke, because the child did not need to. The child looked at her, and she understood things she had not understood before she had been looked at, and when she woke up she could not say what those things were, only that they had changed the shape of something inside her chest. She had told a therapist about the dreams once, when she was 16. The therapist had used the word vivid and the word imaginative and had given her mother a pamphlet about the importance of regular sleep, and Maya had decided then, at 16, that she would never tell anyone about the dreams again, and she had not. She had also stopped sleeping, mostly. Sleeping made the dreams come, and the dreams made her ache for a place she had never been, and the ache made her useless for the next day. So she had taught herself to live on 3 or 4 hours, and to fill the rest of the night with reading and walking and tea, and her body had eventually agreed to this arrangement, the way bodies will agree to almost anything if you are stubborn enough. But tonight the dreams had come without sleep. Tonight they had bypassed her defenses entirely. Tonight her hand had written things her mind could not read, and the cold of the pen was still in her bones, and the kitchen was still quiet, and the legal pad was still on the table, and underneath everything, very faintly, like someone breathing in the next room, she could feel the child watching her. She tore the pages off the pad. She folded them carefully, the way her grandmother had taught her to fold important letters, and she put them in the inside pocket of her jacket, and she finished her tea, and she watched the blue of the sky slowly become the gray of a day she did not yet know how to enter. Across the city, in an office on the 7th floor of a building she had never been inside, a screen flickered on. The screen was the size of a wall. It was not a screen Maya had ever heard of, and it was not a screen any government had ever audited, and it was watching, very quietly, a small green that was the heat signature of a young woman in a kitchen on Marlborough Street. The dot brightened. The dot dimmed. The dot brightened again. Somewhere in the room with the screen, a man whose face was kind and whose hands were perfectly still made a small sound that was not quite surprise. He picked up a phone. He said one word. The word was a name. The name was Maya's. The morning came like every other morning. The tea was crowded. Someone was arguing in the back of the car about a sports team, the Bruins, she thought, and someone else was holding a coffee that was too full and was concentrating very hard on not spilling it. And a woman near the door was reading a paperback whose spine had been broken so many times it bent in her hand like cloth, and Maya stood holding the pole near the doors and felt, for the first time in her adult life, that none of this was real. Not unreal in the sense of being false. Unreal in the sense of being a thin layer over something else. A tablecloth covering a table she had never seen the legs of. She got off at Park Street and walked the rest of the way to the linguistics building. The walk took 11 minutes. She knew this because she had walked it almost every day for 7 years, and her body had memorized the rhythm of it. The place where the sidewalk dipped and you had to step a little wider. The corner where the wind came up off the common and tried to take your hat. The small bakery on the second block whose smell of warm bread had made her cry once, in her second year, when she had been a great deal more lonely than she was prepared to admit. The bakery was open. The smell was the same. She did not cry. Dr. Eva Reyes's office was on the 4th floor. Dr. Reyes had been Maya's advisor since the first year, which was unusual because Dr. Reyes did not usually take students until their second year. But Dr. Reyes had read Maya's application essay and had requested her specifically, and no one in the department had thought much of it at the time, because Dr. Reyes was 65 years old and had earned the right to her own preferences. Maya knocked. "Come in," said Reyes, and when Maya came in, Reyes looked up from the book she was reading and smiled the small smile she always smiled, and then she saw Maya's face, and the smile fell off her own face the way snow falls off a roof when the temperature changes, all at once and without sound. "What is it?" Reyes said. Maya took the folded pages out of her jacket. She set them on the desk. She unfolded them carefully, the way she had folded them, and she watched Rez's face as her professor's eyes moved down the columns of symbols, and she watched the color leave Rez's face, and she watched Reyes's left hand, which had been holding a pen, set the pen down very slowly, as though it had become heavier. "How long?" Reyes said. "Last night," said Maya. "I don't remember writing them. Have you slept since?" "No. Don't sleep tonight either," Reyes said. "I need to make a call. Don't go home. Stay in the building. Sit in the reading room, and I will come find you in 2 hours." "Eva, what is this?" Reyes looked at her then. Really looked at her, the way she had not quite looked at her for 7 years. The way someone looks at another person when they have been carrying a secret about that person for a long time, and the secret has just become too heavy to carry alone. Reyes's eyes were wet. Maya had never seen them wet before. "It's a language," Reyes said. "I know it's a language." It's a language I have spent 20 years pretending I do not understand. Maya sat down in the chair across the desk. She did not remember choosing to sit down. Outside, somewhere in the corridor, a student was laughing. The laughter was very loud and very far away, the way sounds get when you are about to faint. Tell me, Maya said. Not here. Reyes was already reaching for her coat. Not yet. Tonight. There is someone I need you to meet first. He has been waiting for you for a very long time, Maya. He has been waiting for you since before you were born. The botanical garden was on the west edge of the Fenway. Maya had walked past it 100 times and never been inside. It was the kind of place that other people's relatives took them to on Sunday afternoons, and Maya did not have those kinds of relatives, and so it had remained, for her, a thing seen through fences. Reyes paid for both of them at the gate. Neither of them spoke. The greenhouse was near the back. It was old, the way some greenhouses are old, with iron framework painted green many decades ago, and then painted again over the rust. And the glass panels had the wavy quality of glass that has been hand-blown and slumped under the weight of its own years. Inside, the air was warm and damp, and it smelled of soil and of green growing things, and of the particular kind of patience that is only practiced by people who have decided to spend their lives among plants. The man was at the back of the greenhouse, kneeling beside a low shelf of seedlings, his hands deep in dark earth. He did not look up when they entered. He let them come to him at their own pace. He was old, in the way of someone who had reached the place in age where further aging seemed to slow down. His hair the white of a thing that had finished becoming white years ago, his skin the soft brown of a hand that had spent a lifetime in soil and sun. When he finally stood and turned toward them, he did so without effort, the way a much younger man would have stood, and his eyes found Maya's eyes, and he held them, and he said something in the language she had written on the legal pad. The words moved through her chest before they reached her ears. She understood them. He had said, "You came. I knew you would come." She heard her own voice answer him. She heard her own mouth shape the curved hooked sounds of a language she had never learned, had never heard spoken, had never imagined hearing spoken, and she heard herself say to him, "Who are you?" The man closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, there was water in them, the way there had been water in Reyes's eyes an hour earlier, and he reached out his hand, the palm dark with garden soil, and he placed it very gently against Maya's cheek. "My name on this world is Henry Walsh," he said, and now he was speaking English again, slow, careful English with an accent she could not place, an accent that lived nowhere on earth. "My name in the language you have just spoken is Irish. I am 412 years old. I came to this planet in the year 1679 in a ship that does not exist anymore. I have been waiting for someone like you to be born for almost 3 centuries. You are the first one in 9 generations who has the receiving strong enough to learn us in one night. There is not much time left, Maya-chan. My people are dying, and I need your help, or in 90 days the last of us will be gone." She did not run. She thought she might. She thought, distantly, the way one thinks about a meal one has not yet eaten, that she ought to run, that running was the appropriate response to an old man telling you that he was 400 years old in a greenhouse in the middle of Boston. But she did not run. She stood there with his soil-dark hand against her cheek, and she looked into his eyes, and she understood, in a way she could not have explained to anyone, that he was telling the truth. The understanding came not from the words, but from something underneath the words, some deep recognition, the way you recognize the voice of someone you have not spoken to since childhood and yet know, immediately, in the first syllable, exactly who is speaking. "How?" she said. "Sit," Irish said. "I will tell you what I can tell you in the time we have." There was a small wooden bench near the seedlings. They sat. Reyes stood near the door of the greenhouse with her arms folded across her chest, watching the path outside, the way a person watches a path when they are afraid of who might come down it. Irish did not let go of Maya's hand. "My world was called Velis," he said. "It was the second planet of a star you cannot see from here. It died because the star that warmed it began to fail, and the failing was slow enough that we had time to know we were losing it, and quick enough that we did not have time to save everyone. We built ships. Not many. Not enough. The ships were not the kind that move quickly through space. They were the kind that go to sleep, and they sleep for a long time, and they wake up somewhere new. The ones who came on my ship were 8,000. We chose this world because it had water and air and it had a young species on it that had begun, in the past few hundred of your years, to have the kind of dreams we knew how to enter. We thought, if we could not be ourselves here, we could at least be among a people who would understand us if we ever needed to be understood. We did not know, when we came, that the technology to wake the others would still be 800 years away. We thought we would only need to wait a few generations. There are more of you, Maya said. Asleep. On a ship, he said. It was the second ship. It launched after mine. It arrived later. It could not land. It is in orbit around your 8th planet, the cold one, the blue one. There are 19,000 of my people in cryo-sleep on that ship. The life support has been failing for 40 of your years. It was supposed to last another 2 centuries. It will not. The mathematics are very clear. The mathematics give us 90 of your days. Why are you telling me? Maya said. Because you can speak to them, he said. The ones in sleep. The connection that exists between my people and yours is dream-shaped. It is how we have always communicated. For 400 years my people who walk among yours have been whispering, very softly, into the dreams of your dreamers, your inventors, your poets. We have not been controlling you. We have been keeping each other company. The breakthroughs your species has made in the last 4 centuries, the leaps no one could quite explain, the ideas that came to your great minds at 3 in the morning and were written down before they were lost, these were sometimes us. Sometimes they were just you. Often they were both. We have helped you become the kind of species that might, perhaps, one day, be able to help us. He squeezed her hand. You are the strongest receiver who has been born in 9 generations. The dreams you have had your whole life are not dreams. They are the children of my ship calling to anyone who can hear them. One of them in particular has been calling to you. Her name is Solon. She is the youngest of us. She was born on Earth. She has never been outside the ship of her dreaming because she has never had a body to walk in. She is dying with the others, and she has been calling you, and you have been answering her, and now we are out of time. Maya was crying. She had not noticed when she had started. What do you need me to do? She said. I need you to help me convince your people to mount a rescue, Aresh said. I need you to be the bridge. I cannot do it alone. There are too many of you, and not enough of me, and the things I would have to say cannot come from a mouth like mine. They have to come from a mouth like yours. A mouth your people will believe. They won't believe me either. They might, he said, if you let them dream what you have dreamed. Behind them, at the door of the greenhouse, Reyes made a small sound. She had been watching the path. The path was no longer empty. There were 3 men coming up it, in dark coats, walking with the unhurried purpose of people who have done this before and who have nothing to fear from the doing of it. Iresh, Reyes said. He stood. He looked at the 3 men through the wavy old glass. He smiled, a small sad smile, and he turned back to Maya. Run, he said. Out the back, through the orchid house, across the service road. Eva will take you. There is a place we have prepared. I will hold them here. Do not look back. Do not come for me. I have been ready for this day since before your great-grandmother was born. I am not afraid. Go.
So now we know the truth. The dreams Maya buried at 16 were never just dreams. They were the voices of the Vera 8,000 refugees who came to Earth in 1679 and 19,000 more sleeping on a filling ship around Neptune. 19 days left. That's all they have. Irish, 412 years old, has chosen Maya as the bridge. Dr. Reyes has carried this secret for 20 years. And somewhere in a meadow that isn't a meadow, a child named Solon is waiting for someone to come for her. But men in dark coats are at the greenhouse door. The hiding is over. What comes next will tear her open.
The 3 weeks that followed broke her open like an egg. She lived in the basement of a house in Cambridge that belonged to a woman she had never met. The woman was Vera. Most of the people who came in and out of the house were Vera. They looked human, every one of them, which is to say they looked like the humans of every continent and every history, because they had been hiding among humans for so long that they had taken human shapes the way a river takes the shape of a riverbed, by long pressure and patience. They moved through the world the way refugees move through any world. Quietly, carefully, with a deep awareness of every door. Reyes was with her almost every hour. Reyes had been carrying this secret for 20 years. Reyes's mother had been a receiver, a strong one. A woman who had spent the last decade of her life painting murals of a place she had never visited and could not name, and Reyes had figured it out the year her mother died, when she found, in the back of her mother's closet, a small notebook full of the same impossible alphabet Maya had written on a yellow legal pad in a Boston kitchen at 3:47 in the morning. Reyes had spent the next 20 years quietly finding the others, quietly protecting them, quietly waiting for the receiver who would be strong enough to do what no one else had been able to do. Maya learned the language. The learning came back to her like something she had forgotten rather than something she was discovering for the first time. Every word she met felt like a friend she had not seen since childhood. Within a week, she could speak it with the awkwardness of a careful adult learner. Within 2, she could speak it with the easy fluency of someone who had been speaking it her whole life. And the part of her brain that had spent 7 years studying how languages were learned watched this happen with a kind of distant astonishment, because what was happening to her was not how human brains were supposed to work. She did not say this out loud. There was no one to say it to. She met Solon in dreams every night. Solon was 8 years old. Solon was 8 years old in the way of a Vera child, which meant she had been alive for about 11 Earth years and would be considered a small child by her people for another 20, and she had spent every one of those 11 years inside a dream because her body had never been removed from its cradle on the failing ship around Neptune. Solon lived in the dream the way a fish lives in water. Solon had never seen colors with eyes, only with the part of her mind that the dreams had grown into. Solon showed Maya the world she had never been able to leave. The world inside the dream was the world the Vera had built for their children to grow up in while the ship slept. It was a meadow that did not end, where the grass was the color of nothing on earth, and the sky was 3 colors at once, and the wind made sounds that were almost words but not quite. Solon ran through this meadow with her bare feet, except they were not feet, because Solon had never had feet, and they ran across grass that was not grass, except it was, because for Solon it had always been grass, and that made it grass in every way that mattered. Solon showed her the others. Hundreds, then thousands. Children and elders and young adults. All of them sleeping in their cradles on a dying ship. All of them dreaming together in a meadow that had no end. Some of them were strong in the dream. Some of them were getting weaker. Some of them, when Maya looked at them, had the soft, fading edges of a thing that had been a person and was on its way to becoming something else. "They are leaving us," Solon said, in a voice that was not a voice, but was perfectly Maya's. 2 yesterday, 1 the day before. The matriarch says they are walking ahead of us into the next dream. I don't know what the next dream is. I want to stay in this one until you come. I'm coming, Maya said. How do I know you are real? Solon said. Maya thought about it. She thought about it for what felt like a long time inside the dream, and was probably no time at all outside of it. Then she did the only thing she could think to do. She knelt down in the grass that was not grass, and she opened her arms, and Solon came into them, and Maya held a child she had never met, on a ship she had never seen, with arms that did not exist where the holding was happening, and Solon pressed her face into the place where Maya's neck would have been, and after a long moment Solon said, in a voice that was very small, "Yes, you are real." Maya woke up crying. She cried quietly, because the others in the house were sleeping, but she cried for a long time. She cried in a way that she had never cried before, because she had spent her entire life being told that the most important things in her own mind were imaginary, and now she had touched one of those things, and it had been more real than anything else had ever been. Daniel Park found them on the 18th day. He was 32 years old, and he was a propulsion engineer at NASA, and he had spent 4 years quietly building a personal database of people whose families included unexplained dream comas. Because 4 years ago his older sister Hannah had gone to sleep one Tuesday night and had not woken up, and the doctors had run every test they could think of and had told him, kindly, that they had no idea what was wrong with her. And Daniel was a man who could not live with that. Daniel had built a life on the principle that things either worked or they did not, and that the ones that did not could be made to work if you were patient enough and stubborn enough and kept your hands clean while you worked on them. He had not been able to fix his sister, so he had gone looking for everyone else like her. Maya's name had come up in his database 3 months ago because her grandmother had died of a so-called dream coma in 1994, and because Maya's father had a cousin who had spent the last decade of her life painting murals of a place no one could identify. Daniel had been watching Maya's apartment for 2 weeks before she vanished from it. He had been watching the linguistics building for 1 week after that. He had finally tracked them through Reyes, through a sequence of small mistakes in routine that any normal person would not have noticed, but that Daniel, who noticed everything, had assembled into a map. He came to the door of the house in Cambridge and rang the bell, and when Reyes opened the door he said, without preamble, "I need to talk to Maya Chun. My sister has been in a coma for 4 years. I think she's been talking to your people the whole time. I think I have been the wrong kind of brother for the wrong kind of sister. Please." Reyes let him in. They sat in the basement, the three of them and Iresh's second, a Vera woman called Tasha on Earth who was the elder now that Iresh was gone. Daniel listened. He listened the way an engineer listens, which is to say with his whole face and without interrupting. And when they finished telling him what they were telling him, he was quiet for a long time. And then he said, "Hannah used to wake up sometimes. Once or twice a year. Not for long. Maybe an hour. And she would look at me and she would say things. The last thing she said before she stopped waking up at all, she said, 'The meadow is so thin now. Tell them to come.' I thought she was just confused. I wrote it down because I wrote everything down. I have it in a notebook in my apartment. 'The meadow is so thin now.'" He looked at Maya. "That meant something, didn't it?" "Yes," Maya said. "What does it mean?" "It means," Maya said, "that your sister has been in the meadow with my friend Solon for 4 years, and that she has been holding part of the dream up by herself, and that she has been so tired for so long. And she sent you a message, and you kept it for her, and it found us, and we are going to go get her." Daniel did not cry. Daniel was not a man who cried in front of strangers. He nodded once, the small, definite nod of an engineer who has heard a problem stated cleanly and has accepted that he will now spend the rest of his life solving it. Then he said, "I can get us to Neptune. There is a private spacecraft on a launch pad in New Mexico that I know how to fly. The owner will not know it is missing for 48 hours. After that they will know, and they will be very angry. So we have to go now." That night, Senator Ryan Cole went on television. He had been a senator from Virginia for 12 years. He was 48 years old. He was the kind of handsome that television loves, the kind that translates well into the small rectangle of a screen, with a jaw that held its shape and eyes that knew how to look directly into a camera and find, behind the camera, the specific person watching at home. He had built his career on a single idea, which he had repeated for 12 years in slightly different shapes. And the idea was this: that the soul of a thing was its own to keep, and that any people who did not protect their own soul would eventually find that they had given it away in pieces too small to notice, and that by the time they noticed it would be gone. He had not known, for those 12 years, that he was secretly talking about his own wife. Diane Cole had been having dreams since she was a girl. She had told him about them on their third date, 22 years ago, at a small Italian restaurant in Alexandria where the candles in the wax-covered bottles had made the inside of her glass look like fire. She had said the dreams were strange and beautiful, and she had described one of them: a dream of a long staircase that went sideways into a horizon that bent, and Ryan Cole had reached across the table and taken her hand and told her that he hoped she would tell him about every one of them for the rest of their lives, and she had. Mostly, although she had stopped describing them in detail because over the years it had begun to seem to her that he was no longer quite listening. He listened to her about other things. He loved her, very much, in his way. But the dreams had become a small private place that she had to herself, and she had stopped trying to bring him into them, and she had not minded, because she had thought that everyone had a small private place, and that this was hers. Ryan Cole appeared on every major network at 8 o'clock Eastern Time on a Tuesday. He spoke for 11 minutes. He spoke about an alien presence that had been on Earth for centuries. He spoke about a parasitic species that had been infiltrating human consciousness through dreams. He spoke about the millions of humans, perhaps tens of millions, perhaps more, whose minds were now no longer fully their own. He spoke with the calm, grave certainty of a man who believed every word he was saying, because he did believe them. The intelligence had reached him through channels he trusted. The intelligence was not wrong, exactly. It was only missing the parts that mattered. He used the word purity 9 times. He used the word cleansing 3 times. He announced the formation of an emergency federal task force. He announced the suspension of certain civil liberties for those identified as potentially compromised. He announced that Earth was at war, and that the war was not a war anyone could see, and that this made it the most dangerous war humanity had ever fought. By midnight, Vera and 17 countries had been pulled out of their homes. By morning, Iresh had been killed on live television. He had been brought into a sterile white room. He had been asked to defend himself. He had not. He had stood very still, with his soil-dark hands at his sides, and he had looked into the camera as though he could see through it to every person who was watching, and he had said only one sentence, in slow, careful English, before they killed him. He had said, "You have always been better than this." Maya watched it from the basement. She did not move. She did not make a sound. Daniel was beside her, and Reyes was beside her, and Tasha on Earth was on the other side of the room with her hands pressed against her mouth, and Maya did not move while Iresh died on a screen 6 feet away from her. And when it was over, she stood up, and she walked into the small bathroom that was attached to the basement, and she closed the door, and she sat down on the floor with her back against the door, and she put her hands over her face, and she did not cry. She did not cry. She sat there, in the dark of her own hands, and she felt something inside her chest that she had never felt before. The feeling was not anger. The feeling was older than anger. The feeling was the cold, patient certainty of a person who has just decided that the rest of her life is going to be about a single thing, and that nothing else will matter, and that if she has to become someone she does not yet recognize in order to do that thing, then she will become that person, and she will not look back to see what she has left behind. When she came out, Daniel and Reyes were already packing.
Irish is dead, killed on live television by a senator who used the word purity 9 times. A man who built an entire war on a lie. Maya sat on a bathroom floor and felt something colder than grief settle into her chest. The certainty that nothing in her life would ever matter again except this. Now, Daniel Part, the engineer whose sister has been holding up the medal for 4 years, has a stolen spacecraft waiting in New Mexico. Reyes is packing 40 days to Neptune, 83 days until 19,000 souls go silent forever. Senator Cole's ships are already coming. Maya is about to leave Earth, but she doesn't yet know what she'll have to give up to save them.
The spacecraft was called the Henrietta. It had been built 3 years earlier by a private aerospace company for a wealthy man who had wanted to be the first private citizen to put his own footprint on Mars. The wealthy man had grown bored with the project, the way wealthy men sometimes do, and the Henrietta had been sitting on a pad in a hangar in New Mexico with a full tank and a serviced reactor and a flight computer that Daniel Park had personally helped design, because Daniel had taken contract work for the wealthy man's company 2 years ago, and the wealthy man's company had never quite gotten around to changing the access codes. They drove for 31 hours. They drove through Pennsylvania and Ohio and Indiana and Illinois and Missouri and Oklahoma and Texas, and they slept in shifts in the back of a van that smelled like the previous owner's golden retriever, and they paid for gas in cash, and they kept the radio off because every news broadcast was about the alien crisis, and the alien crisis was Maya, and Maya did not need to hear it again. Reyes drove most of the time. Reyes did not get tired. Reyes had spent 20 years preparing for a road trip she had never quite believed she would actually take, and now that she was taking it, she seemed almost younger, the way some old people become younger when their lives suddenly require them to be. The Henrietta lifted off at 4 in the morning local time on the 7th day after Iresh had died. The launch was loud in a way that no recording had ever prepared Maya for. The vibration went through the seat and into her bones and into her teeth and into a part of her she had not known existed until it was being shaken. She gripped the armrests until her hands hurt. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair with his hands on the controls, and his face was the calm, focused face of a man doing the thing he had spent his whole life learning how to do. And Reyes sat behind them and watched the sky go from black to thin black to no color at all. And somewhere below them, very far below them now, Senator Cole's task force had just received word that a private spacecraft had launched from New Mexico without authorization and was now beyond their reach. They had a 40-day journey ahead of them. The Henrietta was the fastest private craft ever built, and even so, even with every shortcut Daniel could find in the orbital mechanics, even with the gravity assists and the burns at the right moments, it was going to take 40 days to reach Neptune. They had 83 days left in Iresh's count. The math, as the math always did, would either work or it would not. For the first 3 days, None of them talked very much. Maya watched the earth get smaller. She had thought she would not feel anything. Watching that, she had been wrong. The earth got smaller and she felt something in her chest she had never felt before, a homesickness she had not earned yet, because she had not been gone long enough to have earned it, but a homesickness anyway, deep and clean, for the small specific things she had not thought she would miss. The way the steam rose off her morning tea, the smell of the bakery on the second block, the sound of her downstairs neighbor playing the cello very badly on Sunday afternoons. She had not loved any of those things, exactly, while she had been near them. She had only lived among them. But now she could see, in the small white-blue marble of the planet getting smaller in the window, that living among things had been its own kind of loving, and that she had been doing it her whole life without noticing. On the fourth day, Daniel came back from the cockpit with 2 trays of reheated rations and set one of them in front of her. The rations were terrible. The rations were always terrible. They were the kind of food that someone had designed specifically to keep a human body alive for a year, without any consideration for what the human body would think about being kept alive that way. Maya took a bite. She made a face. Daniel laughed, and the laugh surprised both of them, because none of them had laughed in 9 days, and the laugh sounded strange in the small space of the Henrietta, the way someone's laugh sounds in a church. Hannah used to make me eat my vegetables by telling me they tasted worse than they did, he said. She would say, "Eat them, Daniel. They taste like wet cardboard. Be brave." And then I would eat them and they would taste like vegetables, and I would feel like I had survived something. He looked at his food. This actually does taste like wet cardboard. I don't have anything to compare it to. Maya laughed. Then she did not. She set down her fork. She looked at him across the small folded table that pulled out from the wall, and she saw him properly for the first time, not as the engineer who had appeared at the door in Cambridge, not as the man flying her to Neptune, but as a brother who had spent 4 years missing his sister and looking for the reason she had been taken away from him. "Tell me about her," Maya said. He did. He told her about Hannah for an hour. He told her about how Hannah had taught him to ride a bike by running alongside him with one hand on the back of the seat and lying about whether she was still holding on. He told her about how Hannah had made him try out for the school play in the 7th grade because she said he was too quiet and needed to be loud somewhere. He told her about how Hannah had called him every Sunday from college, even when she was busy, even when she was unhappy, even when she had nothing to say, and how he had not always picked up, and how he would give every year of his remaining life to pick up every one of those calls now. He told her about the last thing Hannah had said while she was awake. He told her how he had written it down. He told her how he had carried it in a notebook in his pocket for 4 years, and how he had read it out loud to himself sometimes, late at night, as though the saying of it might mean something. "The meadow is so thin now," he said. "Tell them to come." Maya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, she was holding it up. The dream. She was one of the strong ones, Daniel. She was holding part of the meadow up so the children could keep playing. That is what she was doing for 4 years. That is what she has been doing while you have been missing her. She has been being your sister for the sake of strangers, because she is the kind of person who, even in a coma, will still try to take care of children she has never met. Daniel put his fork down. He covered his face with his hands. He did not make a sound. Maya did not say anything else. She reached across the table and put her hand on his arm and left it there, and they sat like that for a long time, and the Henrietta hummed its quiet hum around them, and somewhere ahead of them, very far ahead of them, Solon was running through grass that was not grass and waiting for them to come. Later that night, Reyes came back from her own berth with a small device in her hand. The device was old. It was the kind of small handheld recorder that had been popular 50 years ago, before phones had absorbed every other small electronic into themselves. Reyes sat down on the bench across from Maya and turned the device over in her hands. "My mother left this for me," she said. "When she died, she left a note that said, 'Play this when you have figured out what I was doing.' Not before. I waited 2 years after I figured it out. Then I played it. I have played it once a year on her birthday for 19 years. I am going to play it now. I have never played it for anyone else. Is that all right?" "Yes," said Maya. Reyes pressed the button. The voice that came out of the small speaker was a woman's voice. The voice was old, the way voices get when they have been used for a long time. And it was warm, the way voices get when they belong to people who have spent their lives loving a particular other person. "Eva, sweetheart," the voice said. "I want you to know that I knew. Not all of it. Not the way you will know it, eventually. But I knew that the dreams I was having were real. I knew that the place I went to in them was a real place. I knew that the people I met there were people, and that they were tired, and that they were waiting for something, and I knew that I would not be alive to see what they were waiting for. I want you to know that I was not afraid. I was never afraid. I want you to know that the murals were a way of saying thank you to them for keeping me company for all those years when your father was gone and you were at school and the house was very quiet. I was not lonely, Eva. I was never lonely. I want you to know that. And I want you to know that if you ever meet them, if they ever come for what they are waiting for, you should help them. They are good. They have been good to me. Please be the person who helps them. I have spent your whole life believing that you would be. The recording ended. Reyes put the device down on the table. She did not look at Maya. She looked at her own hands, and she turned them over once, the way one turns over a pair of gloves to check that they are still the right pair, and then she said, very quietly, I have been doing what she asked me to do for 20 years. I was beginning to think I would die before I finished. I am very glad I am here, Maya. I am very glad I am here with you. Maya reached across the table and took her hand. They sat like that, the way she had sat with Daniel an hour earlier, and the Henrietta hummed around them. And somewhere in the cockpit a console blinked the small, steady blink of a course that was holding true, and Maya understood, for the first time, that she was not alone in this anymore. She had been alone with the dreams her whole life. She was not alone now. On the 11th day, Maya began to lose pieces of herself. It started small. She woke up one morning and could not remember the name of the cat she had owned in graduate school. She could remember everything else about the cat, the pattern of his fur, the precise weight of him in her lap, the small chirruping sound he had made when she came home, but she could not remember his name, and the name had been important to her, and the absence of it was like reaching for a tooth that was no longer in the place it had always been. 2 days later, it was a song. She tried to hum a song her father used to hum in the car when she was a child, and the tune came out wrong. She tried again. It came out wrong again. By the third try, she could not remember whether she was misremembering the song or whether the song had never sounded the way she had thought it sounded, and the not knowing was worse than the forgetting. By the third week, she would sometimes look down at her own hands and not, for a moment, recognize them as hers. The hands were Maya's hands. She knew this. She could see the small white scar on the knuckle of her left ring finger from when she had been bitten by a dog at age 9. But there was also, sometimes, the faint impression of other hands underneath them, hands she had never had, hands with longer fingers and a different palm shape. And when she closed her eyes, she could feel, for an instant, the memory of using those hands to pick up a tool she had never seen, in a workshop she had never entered, on a world she had never visited. She told no one. She did not need to tell them. Reyes saw it. Reyes had seen her own mother go through a thinner version of the same thing in the last decade of her life, and Reyes recognized the small, faraway look that came into Maya's eyes in the middle of conversations now, the moments when Maya was no longer entirely in the room. Reyes did not say anything either. There was nothing to say. The thing that was happening to Maya was the thing that had to happen for Maya to do what she was going to do, and saying it out loud would not change it, and would only require Maya to comfort someone else when Maya did not have any comfort to spare. On day 28, Solon began to flicker. The dreams became thinner. Maya would enter the meadow and find that some parts of it were no longer there. The grass that was not grass would have patches in it, places where the color was washed out, places where the sound of the wind that was not wind did not reach. Solon herself would sometimes be slightly transparent. She would look at Maya with the eyes that were not eyes, and she would smile the small, brave smile she had always smiled, and she would say, I am still here. I am still here, Maya. Hannah is helping me. Hannah is so tired. Please come soon. I am coming, Maya would say. We are coming. 12 more days. 12 is a long time, Solon would say. I know. I will be here. I promise. I know. On day 31, the pursuit caught up with them. Senator Cole had not been idle. Senator Cole had spent the last 3 weeks pulling every lever he had built across 12 years in the Senate, and he had built a great many levers. The Pure Mind Initiative was no longer a task force. It was an emergency wartime authority, and it had its own ships, and 3 of those ships had been launched from low Earth orbit on day 8, and they had been gaining on the Henrietta slowly ever since. The way a tide comes in slowly, the way bad news arrives slowly, the way grief arrives slowly until it is suddenly already there. The lead ship was called the Ascendant. It had been designed for asteroid intercept. It was armed. Daniel saw it on his sensors first. He came back from the cockpit and sat down across from Reyes and Maya at the small table where they ate their meals, and he laid his hands flat on the table the way a person does when they are about to say something they have already practiced in their head, and he said, "They are 40 hours behind us. They are going to catch us 6 hours short of Neptune. There is one thing I can do about it. I am going to tell you what it is, and you are going to listen to all of it before you answer." He told them, 6 hours short of Neptune, the Henrietta would have to make a final correction burn to enter orbit around the Vera ship. The burn required a particular configuration of the engines that left the craft, briefly, nearly defenseless. The Ascendant would catch them in the middle of that burn. There was, however, an old maintenance shuttle attached to the side of the Henrietta, a small thing not designed for combat, but designed for short-range work in difficult orbits. The shuttle had a particular maneuvering capability that could, if used properly, position it directly in the path of an incoming vessel and force that vessel into an emergency course correction that would take it hours to recover from. It would also, in the process, almost certainly destroy the shuttle and kill whoever was piloting it. "I am the only one who can fly the shuttle," Daniel said. "It needs hands that have done this before. I have done this before." "No," said Maya. "You have not heard the rest." "No." Maya. "No, Daniel. No. We will find another way. We will." "There is no other way," said Reyes. Maya looked at her. Reyes was looking at Daniel, not at Maya, and Reyes's face was very calm. The way a face becomes calm when the person inside it has just understood something and has decided not to fight the understanding. "I will fly the shuttle," Reyes said. "Eva," said Daniel. "You will fly the Henrietta? You will get her there. You will help her wake them, and you will bring my mother's people home. I have spent my whole life waiting to do something for them that mattered. This is the something. This is the moment my mother was preparing me for. She knew. She always knew. I am not afraid, Daniel. I have not been afraid since I was a girl. Please let me have this. You don't know how to fly the shuttle. You will teach me. You have 35 hours. You will teach me everything I need to know in 35 hours. I am 65 years old, and I have spent my entire adult life learning impossible things in short windows of time, and I am very good at it." Daniel opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked at Maya. Maya was crying. Maya did not even know she was crying. She could not seem to make it stop, and she did not try, and Daniel reached across the table and took her hand and squeezed it once, the way he had squeezed it the night she had told him about Hannah holding the meadow up. "All right," he said. Reyes nodded once. Then she stood up, and she walked to the small kitchen alcove, and she put on the kettle for tea, the way a woman puts on the kettle for tea when she has just made the most important decision of her life and does not want to be rude about it. The kettle began to sing, the small steady song of water becoming itself. Maya watched her professor make tea, and the watching of it broke something inside her chest, and she went into the small bathroom again and closed the door and pressed her hands against her mouth and made no sound. When she came out, Reyes had left a mug on the table for her. The next 35 hours were quiet and full. Daniel taught Reyes the controls of the maintenance shuttle. Reyes practiced on the simulator on the flight computer until the simulator showed her the same drill so many times that her fingers began to anticipate it. They ate one meal together. Reyes told 2 stories about her mother that Maya had never heard before, both of them small and ordinary and perfect. Daniel told them about the time Hannah had convinced him to dye his hair green for prom, and about how their parents had looked at him in the front hall and said nothing for a full 10 seconds, and then their mother had said, "Well, all right then," and that had been the end of the conversation about the green hair forever. In the dream that night, Solon was very thin. She was sitting in the grass that was not grass, and her hands were folded in her lap, and her eyes were closed, and she was breathing the slow, deep breaths of someone who is trying very hard to stay awake. "I am coming," Maya said. 3 more days. 3 days is a long time," Solon said. "I know. Hannah is gone, Maya." Maya did not say anything. She knelt down in the grass that was not grass, and she gathered Solon into her arms, and she held her, and Solon pressed her face into Maya's neck, and after a long time Solon said, in a voice that was so small Maya could barely hear it, "She is in the next dream now." She said to tell her brother that she always picked up. Even the calls she did not pick up, she picked up, in her heart. She said he should know that. Maya woke up. The cabin was dark. Daniel was asleep in the pilot's chair, his head resting against the side of the seat, his breath even and quiet. Maya did not wake him. She did not tell him. She would tell him after. She would tell him when there was time. She sat in the dark of the Henrietta with her hands folded in her lap, the way Solon had been sitting, and she watched the small steady stars through the front window, and she made a promise to a child she had never met about a brother, she had only just met about a sister she had never met, and the promise was the first real promise of her adult life. The Ascendant arrived on schedule. Reyes was already in the maintenance shuttle. She had said her goodbyes the night before, the small private goodbyes that did not have the weight of being last words, because she had not wanted last words and Daniel and Maya had honored that. She had hugged each of them for exactly the right length of time. She had said to Daniel, "Be the kind of brother to her that you would have been to Hannah," and she had said to Maya, "My mother was right about you." She was right about everything. Then she had gone through the airlock, and the airlock had closed, and that had been that. The shuttle separated at the precise moment Daniel had calculated. Maya watched it on the side view screen, a small bright shape moving away from them, growing smaller, angling hard toward the larger shape that was approaching from behind. Reyes did not say anything over the radio. Reyes had asked them not to talk to her during it, because she did not want her last sounds to be the sounds of saying goodbye again, and they had agreed. The shuttle moved into the path of the Ascendant. The Ascendant tried to correct. The geometry of the situation did not allow for it. The two ships met, very briefly, in a small white light, and then there was no more shuttle and no more Ascendant, and the other two ships of the pursuit, the two that had been an hour behind, would now be 36 hours behind, and that was enough, and that had always been the whole point. Daniel reached over and took Maya's hand without looking away from the controls. He held it. He did not let go for a long time. The Vera ship was not what Maya had expected. She had expected something like a human spacecraft, but bigger, a scaled-up version of the same logic. The Vera ship was not that. It was the shape of a long, curved leaf, and it was the color of something that had been silver once and had been weathered by space for 400 years into something that was no longer a color at all, and the surface of it had a pattern that her eyes could not quite hold, the way certain dreams have details you cannot quite remember when you wake up. It hung in the dark above Neptune like a thing that had been forgotten and was waiting, very patiently, to be remembered. Daniel docked the Henrietta against the airlock. The airlock recognized the docking signal Irish had given them 3 weeks ago in the basement in Cambridge, and it opened, and Maya went through it alone, because Daniel could not, because Daniel was not a receiver, and the part of the ship she was about to enter would not respond to anyone who was not. The corridor inside was cold and dim. The walls had the same not-quite color as the outside. The floor felt slightly soft under her boots, the way moss feels soft under boots, and when she touched the wall with her gloved hand the wall felt warm, faintly, the way the back of a sleeping animal is warm. The air had a smell she had no word for. Some part of her body recognized it. Some part of her body had been smelling it her whole life in dreams. The matriarch was in the central chamber. She was lying in a cradle the shape of a long open hand, and she was the size of a small woman, and her skin was the soft gray of an old river stone, and she was very, very old. Her eyes were closed when Maya entered. Then they opened. They were the same color as the dreams. She did not speak. She did not need to. She lifted one hand, very slowly, and Maya crossed the chamber, and she knelt down beside the cradle, and she took the matriarch's hand in both of hers, and the matriarch looked in her eyes for a long quiet moment, and then she said, in the language Maya had written on a yellow legal pad in a Boston kitchen at 3:47 in the morning, "To wake them, I will need you. All of you. There will be no Maya after. There will be only what we become together. Do you choose this?" Maya thought about her grandmother's green ceramic mug. She thought about the bakery on the second block. She thought about the bird that had begun the small experimental sounds of a song outside her kitchen window. She thought about her father humming a song in the car when she was a child. She thought about Daniel's face when he had said the meadow is so thin now. She thought about Solon, holding very still in the grass that was not grass, breathing the slow, careful breaths of a child who was trying not to be the next one to walk into the next dream. She thought about Iresh's hand against her cheek. She thought about her grandmother. She thought about her mother, who was still alive in a small house in Concord, and who would never quite understand what had happened to her daughter, and who would love her anyway, because that was what Maya's mother had always done. She thought about what it meant to be a person. She thought about how a person was not really a single thing. A person was a long line of things, the people who had loved them and the places they had walked and the small particular preferences they had developed about tea and bread and silence. And she had been one kind of person for 28 years, and now she was about to become a different kind, and the different kind would still be her, in some way she could not quite describe. The way a river is still itself when it joins another river and becomes something larger. She thought about Solon. She squeezed the matriarch's hand. "I choose this," she said. The merging took 6 hours. Daniel watched what he could of it on the Henrietta's monitors, which was very little, because most of what was happening could not be measured by the Henrietta's instruments. The chamber pulsed with a slow, soft light. Maya did not move. The matriarch did not move. The cryo-cradles around the chamber, the rows and rows of them, the 19,000 of them, began to warm. The temperature inside the chamber rose by 6 degrees over 6 hours. The air filled with a sound that was almost music. Behind the Vera ship, in the cold black of Neptune's outer orbit, the second pursuit ship arrived. It did not fire. It hailed. Senator Cole was on board. He had come personally. He had insisted on coming personally. He had told his staff, in the small private moments when politicians sometimes speak the truth even to themselves, that he needed to look at this woman in the eye when he stopped her, that he did not trust anyone else to do it correctly, that this was the kind of thing that history would judge him for, and he intended to be judged for it himself. He hailed Daniel. "This is Senator Ryan Cole," he said. "I am giving you one chance to stand down and hand over the alien sympathizer. We have your full identification. We have your family, your parents in San Diego, your aunt in Vermont. We have not done anything to them. Whether we ever do anything to them is up to you. Stand down." Daniel did not stand down. Daniel did not say anything. Daniel sat in the pilot's chair of the Henrietta and watched the slow, soft pulse of the Vera ship through the front window. And he thought about Hannah, and he thought about Reyes, and he thought about the small, careful way Maya had held his hand the night Reyes had said, "I will fly the shuttle." And he reached over and turned off the radio. And he sat in the silence of his own ship and waited for whatever came next. What came next was not what Senator Cole had planned for. In the central chamber of the Vera ship, 6 hours into the merging, Maya's hand opened, and the matriarch's hand opened, and a single soft pulse left the chamber. The pulse was not a weapon. The pulse was not a signal in any frequency that human technology could read. The pulse was a dream. It was the largest dream that had ever been dreamed, because it was being dreamed by 27,000 minds at once. The matriarch and the 19,000 sleepers and the 8,000 Vera who walked among humans and had been waiting for 400 years for this moment, and Maya, who was now part of all of them. And the dream went out from the Vera ship and crossed the 4 billion kilometers between Neptune and Earth in no time at all, because dreams do not cross distances the way ships do. For 60 seconds, every human being on Earth dreamed. They dreamed the same dream. They dreamed the meadow. They dreamed the children running through the grass that was not grass. They dreamed the long journey across the dark from a world that was no longer a world. They dreamed the 400 years of silence and patience. They dreamed the small voices that had spoken into their dreams for centuries, the ideas that had come to them at 3 in the morning, the breakthroughs they had been told were their own, and they understood, in the way that only dreams can make a person understand, that they had been kept company. They had not been alone. There had been someone in the next room of their consciousness all this time, and that someone had loved them, very quietly, without ever asking to be loved back. In a hospital in Cleveland, a woman who had been in a coma for 11 years opened her eyes for the first time in a decade. In an apartment in Mumbai, a poet who had been blocked for 2 years sat up and wrote for 3 hours without stopping. In a small house in Virginia, Diane Cole stood at her kitchen window and watched the rain on the glass, and she felt her husband's mind brush against hers, very briefly, the way it had not brushed against hers in many years, and she felt him understand her for the first time. She felt him understand that she had been more than herself her whole life. She felt him understand that the more had not subtracted from her, had not infected her, had not made her less his wife. The more had been part of why he had loved her in the first place. The dreams had been part of her, and he had loved the part without knowing what it was. She picked up the phone. She called him. In the bridge of the second pursuit ship, 4 billion kilometers away, Senator Ryan Cole answered his wife's call. He had not slept in 32 hours. He had just woken from a 60-second dream that had remade the inside of his skull. His hand was shaking when he held the phone to his ear. His wife said his name. He could not speak. His wife said his name again. He sat down in the captain's chair. He listened to her breathing on the other end of the line, 4 billion kilometers away, and he thought about every dream she had ever tried to tell him about, and that he had not quite listened to. And he thought about the small private place she had kept to herself for 22 years, and he thought about how he had built a career on protecting the souls of people he had never met from invasions that had not happened. And he opened his mouth, and the only thing that came out was the word, Diane. He gave the order to stand down. The Vera awoke. It was slow. It was beautiful. The cradles opened one by one, the way flowers open in time-lapse, and the sleepers rose from them, blinking, holding hands that had not held anything in 400 years, looking at one another with the careful, tender recognition of a family that has been separated for so long that the reunion takes a moment to land. Solon was the third to wake. She came through the corridor on her own legs. She had legs now. She had a body now. She had the soft gray skin of her people and the same color eyes as the matriarch and a face that Maya had only ever seen in dreams and was now seeing for the first time. And she came down the corridor, and she stopped when she saw Maya, and she looked up at her, and she said, in the language that Maya had written on a yellow legal pad, "You came." "I came," Maya said. "You are different now," Solon said. "Yes." "Are you sad?" Maya knelt down in front of her. She put her hands on the small shoulders of a child who had only ever been a child in her dreams. She looked into the eyes that were the color of the dreams. She thought about how to answer. "I am everything," she said. "I am sad and I am not sad. I am here, and I am also still in a kitchen in Boston a long time ago. I am Maya, and I am also one of you now. I do not know how to tell you what I am, but I am very glad to meet you. I am very glad to meet you with my hands." Solon reached up and put her own small hand against Maya's cheek. The same place, Maya realized. The same place Iresh had put his hand in the greenhouse 3 months and a lifetime ago. "Thank you," Solon said. Daniel came aboard an hour later. He came aboard slowly, carefully, the way a person enters a holy place, and the Vera made way for him, and they looked at him with the open, curious gentleness of a people meeting someone they have heard about for a long time, and one of them, an older woman whose face Daniel did not recognize, but whose eyes he did, came forward and took his hand and said, in careful English, "Your sister sends her love. She held us up for 4 years. We owe you everything." Daniel did not cry. Daniel was still not a man who cried in front of strangers. He nodded once, the small, definite nod of an engineer who has heard a problem stated cleanly, and he held the older woman's hand for a long time, and after a while he asked her, very quietly, what Hannah had been like in the meadow. The woman told him. She told him for an hour. Maya stood at the other end of the corridor with Solon's hand in hers, and she watched Daniel listen to a stranger tell him about his own sister, and she understood that this, too, was a kind of homecoming, a slower kind, the kind that only some people ever got. The aftermath was longer than the journey. It took 3 weeks to begin moving the Vera off the ship. It took 6 months to negotiate the legal status of 19,000 new residents of a planet that did not have a precedent for anything like them. It took 2 years to dismantle what was left of the Pure Mind Initiative, and it took Senator Ryan Cole exactly 1 year and 1 day after his return to Earth to resign from the Senate, and to begin a new and quieter life with a wife he had spent 22 years not quite listening to and was now learning to listen to properly. He was not forgiven by everyone. He had not asked to be. He spent the rest of his life on the small, steady work of becoming someone slightly different from who he had been, and he made progress, in the way that anyone makes progress, slowly, with setbacks, with the constant quiet help of one specific person who had decided to forgive him and had meant it. Daniel went back to NASA. He stayed there for the rest of his career. He named his first daughter Hannah. He told her about her aunt every birthday until she was old enough to start asking him to tell her, and then she told him, and he listened. Maya did not come back to Earth for a long time. She lived on the Vera ship. She lived in the long, curved leaf of it, in the central chamber where she had merged with the matriarch, and she walked the corridors with Solon, and she learned the rest of the language by living inside it, and she became, slowly, something that did not have a single word in any human tongue. She was Maya. She was the matriarch's voice. She was the bridge between 2 species. She was a person who had given up the small private right to be only one thing, and who had found that the giving up had been the smallest possible price for the largest possible love. She wrote letters home. She wrote them in her own handwriting. They were not in the Vera language, and they were not, anymore, entirely in English either. Her mother kept every one of them. Her mother put them in a wooden box on the dresser in the small house in Concord, and her mother read them sometimes in the evening, and her mother understood, in the way that mothers understand, that her daughter was happy in a way her daughter had never been before, and that this happiness had cost her daughter something that could never be returned, and that both of these things were true, and that this was, perhaps, what every parent of every child eventually had to learn, the small, terrible secret that the people we raise become themselves at our expense, and that it is right that they do, and that we would not have it any other way. Years later, after the Vera had founded their first new colony on a small island that the world had given them, after the language Maya had written on a yellow legal pad had been added to the official linguistic database of every university on Earth, after the dream comas had ended and the hospitals had emptied and the receivers had all woken up and gone home to families who had stopped expecting them, after Senator Cole had died and been quietly mourned by the wife he had finally come to know, after Daniel had retired and his daughter Hannah had grown up and become a marine biologist in Maine, after all of it, on a clear night in early October, in a small house in Concord that had once belonged to Maya's mother and now belonged to Maya's niece, a child of 7 was sitting up at the window in her pajamas because she could not sleep. The child's name was Eva. She had been named after a great-aunt she had never met, and she had her great-aunt's quiet patience, and she had inherited the family's particular trouble with sleeping, the trouble that ran in their blood the way other families had blue eyes or dimples. She sat up at the window because the bed was too quiet, and because the stars outside the window were not too quiet, and she pressed her forehead against the cool glass, and she watched the small, bright points of light over the dark trees, and she thought about all the things a 7-year-old thinks about when the world is asleep and she is not. She did not know about her great-aunt Maya. She would know, eventually. She would know when she was old enough for the story. She would know that her family had a particular gift, that the gift had been part of what saved a people, that the people had stayed and were still here, in the small island colony off the coast of Florida, and that some of them came to Boston sometimes to visit the great-aunt who had been the bridge. She did not know any of this yet. She only knew that she was awake. She only knew that the stars were beautiful. She only knew that her hand, when she pressed it against the glass, looked very small against the great enormous dark beyond it. She only knew that there was something she could almost feel, just at the edge of her thinking, like a voice in the next room speaking very quietly to someone who was not her, and that the voice was not frightening. The voice was kind. The voice had been there as long as she could remember, in the quiet places between her own thoughts, in the small spaces where she was alone with herself. She did not know that the voice was her great-aunt Maya, 4 billion kilometers away on a long curved leaf of a ship in orbit around Neptune, whispering to the dreamers of Earth as the Vera had whispered to them for 400 years, because that was what bridges were for, because that was the work she had chosen for the rest of her very long life. She did not know. She only knew that she was not lonely. She pressed her small hand against the cold glass. She watched the stars. She dreamed.
And so it ends. Not with a battle, not with a flag, but with a small girl pressing her hand against cold glass, listening to a voice she doesn't yet know is her great aunt's. Maya gave up being only one thing, so that 19,000 strangers could live. Rays flew into the dark so the bridge could be built. And Daniel finally learned what his sister had been doing in all those silent years. This is a story about the voices that whisper into our dreams at 3 in the morning. The ideas we think are our own. The company we never knew we had. Maya Chen lost herself to save our people. And in losing herself, she became something larger. A bridge across 4 billion kilometers of dark, whispering to a child at a window that she is not and has never been alone. Sleep well tonight. Someone may be listening.